All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's public consultation webinar. Today, we are presenting ICR015, the Impact Improved Forest Management, or IIFM, developed by Pina Earth. This methodology is currently under renewed public consultation as a part of the ICR's methodology approval process. ICR015 was previously made available for public consultation from 29th October to 28th November 2025. Some of you may have also joined that webinar that we hosted last November. Following that consultation and further review by ICR, the methodology developers submitted an updated version of the methodology with some material updates. ICR therefore opened up a new public consultation to allow stakeholders to review and comment on the revised methodology. The purpose of today's session is to provide a short introduction to ICR and the methodology approval process, explain the consultation context, and then hand it over to Pina to present the methodology in more detail and the updates that they have been doing. Most importantly, this webinar is part of the public consultation process, and we welcome your questions, comments, and feedback. Before we start, I would like to highlight that ICR has events section on our website, where you can find information on upcoming webinars, workshops, and on-demand recordings from previous sessions. All right. So for the agenda, today's session has three parts. So first, we will provide a brief overview of the ICR and the methodology approval process. Second, Pina will be presenting the methodology, including the scope, key features, main updates since the earlier consultation. And finally, we will open up the floor for questions and discussions. And we encourage all of you who have joined to submit questions during the session, and you should be able to just start now. If you have some questions, you should be able to click some button in the right corner of your screen, and you will find Q&A from there and submit your questions. So today we are joined by representatives from ICR, being me and Pina. From ICR, I will be providing the introduction and overview of the process. And from Pina, we are joined by Till Standarski, Ronja Wolf, and Vincent Furstenberg. I hope I got the pronunciation just spot on. Till is a methodology level lead at Pina. He leads the methodology department and is responsible for the development, refinement, and application of methodologies for nature-based climate protection projects, including methods for quantifying CO2 sequestration, simulating forest growth, and designing data-driven certification processes. Ronja is the head of product at Pina. She leads company strategy and is responsible for product market fit of Pina carbon project and methodologies. She has experience across the full carbon project development cycle. And finally, Vincent is a forest and methodology advisor at Pina Earth. He's an Austrian carbon farming and forestry expert specializing in nature-based climate solutions, climate change adaptation, sustainable land management, and transparent carbon accounting. Together, the speakers bring expertise from across carbon markets, methodology development, forest carbon accounting, improved forest management, and project implementation. To the process, I will keep this introductory part brief because the team has prepared a detailed presentation on the methodology itself and its update. At ICR, methodologies go through structured approval process, including methodology development, public consultation, independent validation by approved VVPs, ICR's review, and final approval. The purpose of this process is to ensure that methodologies are transparent, robust, conservative, and aligned with applicable international standards and ICR's program requirements. The public consultation is an important part of this process because it allows stakeholders to review and comment on the methodology before validation and final approval. So what is ICR? ICR is both a global GHG program and a registry platform. ICR supports climate projects and methodologies across different sectors and project types. Our role is to support credible climate action through transparent project registration, robust accounting, independent validation and verification, quality assurance, and clear requirements for the issuance of carbon credits. ICR's objective is to support credible carbon markets while enabling innovation in climate mitigation methodologies and projects. ICR supports the development of new methodologies where existing methodologies do not adequately cover a project activity or methodological approach. To be approved under the program, methodologies must align with ISO 14064-2 and applicable ICR own requirements, which are aligned to carbon market expectations. They must undergo public consultation, be validated by an approved VVP, and complete ICR's internal review and final approval. This provides a structured and transparent pathway for assessing new or updated methodologies before they can be applied to projects under the program. To the criteria or the requirements. So the ICR program builds up on ISO 14064 as being the foundation. This establishes the fundamentals for project level GHG accounting or project accounting. ICR then adds carbon market specific requirements, including eligibility, safeguards, additionality, permanence, avoidance of double counting, monitoring, verification, and crediting rules. Methodologies act as the blueprint for applying these requirements consistently. They define how projects determine baselines, establish boundaries, quantify impacts, monitor data, assess leakage, permanence, and demonstrate that the resulting benefits are real, measurable, additional, transparent, conservative, and verifiable. To support the developers, ICR provides methodology requirements, templates, definitions, and process requirements or documents. This helps to ensure that methodologies are prepared in a consistent way and can be assessed efficiently by ICR, VVPs, and other stakeholders. For this methodology, this means that the methodology should clearly describe the project activity, applicability conditions, baseline and project scenarios, additionality approach, qualification procedures, leakage, permanence, monitoring requirements, and the role of the country modules. So what is a methodology? In simple terms, a methodology is a set of criteria and procedures for measuring, calculating, monitoring, reporting, validating, and verifying reduction or removal enhancements. A robust methodology ensures that the outcome are quantifiable, verifiable, conservative, and suitable for independent validation and verification, and essentially demonstrating how the application of the methodology demonstrates alignment to the underlying criteria. This slide summarizes the key components required under the methodology requirements. A methodology must address these core methodology components, including other methodologies and sources that inform the methodology, the methodology approach, summary description, definitions that are applicable to the application of the methodology, applicability conditions, boundary, baseline, scenario, additionality, etc. These are the areas that are assessed during the methodology approval process, and they are the areas where stakeholder feedback is particularly valuable. We, of course, have a template for developing the methodology, which provides the structure for the submission of the methodology. And it ensures that important elements of the methodology are not overlooked, including the applicability condition, additionality, etc. So to the process, It's a linear and non-linear approach. So the process starts where the methodology developer submits a concept note, and ICR reviews that concept note. The methodology is then developed and published for public consultation, validated by a VVV, and then finally reviewed by ICR and submitted for final approval. As I said, this is a non-linear and linear approach. So this process is iterative. Comments from stakeholders, ICR, and the VVP may result in revision before the final methodology is approved. Public consultation, therefore, not just a formality, it's an important opportunity to improve the methodology before validation or the final approval. So, to the timeline of the ICR015, which was previously made available for public consultation last year. Following that consultation, ICR and the methodology developer continued the review process. ICR conducted preliminary review of the updated methodology in May and subsequently reviewed the developer's response and corresponding revision in June. The methodology developer, or PINA, has now submitted an updated version 2.2. Which includes revision to several important elements, including the baseline approach, treatment groups, country modules, additionality, leakage permanence monitoring, quantification procedures, and the allocation of reduction and removal enhancements. Because the methodology was materially updated, we opened a renewed public consultation, and this consultation runs now from 30 June to 30th of July 26. As I said, the public consultation is currently open and will close on 30th of July. We encourage all participants and everyone later viewing this webinar recording to review the methodology and submit comments through the consultation page. You can copy this QR code and it will take you to the public consultation page. So stakeholder feedback is essential for ensuring that the methodology is robust, transparent, practical to apply, and aligned with environmental integrity. Following the public consultation, we will consolidate the comments and share them with the developer and later the VVP. The developer will then respond to the comments and revise the methodology as appropriate before it proceeds to final validation and further review. With that, I would like to invite Pina Earth to present the methodology and the update Pina has been doing on the methodology in more detail, and then we will return back later for the Q&A session. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Gumi. Happy to take over from here. Hi, everyone. Also from our end, my name is Till. I've been with Pina for about 4 years now. And as Gumi already said, I'm heading the methodology development at the moment. Some of you might have been surprised that there's a second public consultation for a methodology that has already run through one, but I think Gumi already pointed out the main reasons for that. There isn't really an area of the methodology that we haven't really touched in this major update, so we felt it's more than appropriate to run you through the changes once again and also collect some more valuable feedback on that. I'll start briefly by introducing the team that did most of the work behind this. I already introduced myself, so I'll continue with Ronja. She's our head of product and thus responsible for our product strategy and our product market fit. And then there's Vincent, who has also played a key role in the development of this methodology as an external advisor and also as the author of the ECS climate methodology that has flowed into the basis of this methodology also significantly. A very brief overview of what has changed. Maybe first of all, the question, why did we do as many changes as we did? It was our ambition to develop a methodology that allows us to generate credits that just meet the current best practice standards that are out there in the market. So beyond all the requirements that are already coming from ICR, we also try to implement as many aspects that are already aligned with the CCP, so the core carbon principles, as well as anything that's already published and known in regards to CRCF. And this has affected most areas of the methodology, as you can see on this slide. So we rebuilt the entire baseline. We introduced treatment groups to allow for better steering of stock retainment and stock increase. We introduced country modules. We rewrote the quantification chapter. We refined the leakage system, and also the additionality chapter, and also introduced the option to develop grouped and bundled projects. I'll jump in right in the juicy part, the core of every IIFM methodology, the baseline. I don't know, some of you might remember in the version 1 that we introduced last year, we still had a static approach, a stock level that the forest owner had to commit to for the entirety of the project duration that was static for the entire period. And now we changed that to a more harvest-based approach that is also dynamic. So we recalculated or rebuilt it with every new project inventory that we have, and that is also calibrated based on historical data and also regional data. So why did we do this? We wanted to have a standardized baseline approach, which we have, because the core of the baseline harvest rate, the beautiful abbreviation of SBPH, the Sustainable Best Practice Harvest Rate, is based on the Gerhardt formula. So this is a standardized way to calculate the harvest rate. And this core harvest rate is then calibrated through two factors, a historical calibration factor and a regional calibration factor. And we did this to kind of ensure that this model harvest value that we use for the baseline is applicable to the project's reality. So for the HCF, we take a look at the past harvest regime that the forest operation has done throughout the last inventory cycle. And for the regional calibration factor, we take a look at national forest inventory data of the region that the project is located in, and then calibrate this baseline harvest rate slightly. I won't go into too much detail on the equations here. If you have questions, please ask them later, but there's a lot of stuff that we have to run through. So what we also did is introduce treatment groups. So this baseline harvest rate is determined per treatment group. And these treatment groups consist of all the tree species that we have on the project area. Why did we do this? We wanted to address one of the biggest points of criticism for IIFM methodologies, building up stock or retaining stock in tree species that are not supposed to do that because they are already unstable to climate change. So we have 5 treatment groups in total: unstable and stable coniferous trees, unstable and stable deciduous trees, and the last treatment group, the stable and ecologically valuable species. And the trick is that the project proponent only gets credited for stock retention or increase in stable or ecologically valuable treatment groups. So through this, we just want to avoid setting perverse incentives to grow stock in unstable tree species and thus increasing risk for calamities. The treatment groups also serve a second purpose. In Europe, it's already generally observable that there is some trend towards acting on climate change and introducing more climate resilient tree species. So this is something we don't want to ignore when building as realistic as possible counterfactual baseline scenario. So this management practice is also implemented already in the baseline. And we do this through slightly adapting the rotation periods that we use for the different treatment groups. So for unstable treatment groups, we slightly reduce the rotation period, thus increasing the harvest rate. So just assuming that the forest operations try to reduce stocks in these endangered tree species. And the opposite is true for the stable tree species groups, where we assume that also in the baseline, the rotation period gets extended, and thus the harvest level is slightly decreased. When implementing these treatment group allocations, we faced a very interesting challenge. Obviously, this is a very sensible topic of the methodology, as it decides or determines whether stock increase or retention in a tree species can contribute towards the sink performance of the project. So this has to be a standardized process and nothing where there's too much wiggle room for the project proponent. So that was an important aspect of us. But at the same hand, we want to develop a methodology that is applicable in various European countries. And therefore, we also have to consider the heterogeneity of the forests we have in Europe. So this is one of the reasons why we introduced country modules and thus rework the general structure of the methodology description. And this way we have the option to describe the general process in the methodology description, that there has to be a particular data source that decides whether a tree species is considered stable or unstable, but we can then use the country modules to define this exact data source. So this is part of the country modules, and they are also used for other aspects of the methodology description. For example, as data source for the regional calibration factor, as well as for the market leakage assessment. Yeah, sorry, I'm talking really, really fast, but I'm trying to stick to this time schedule here. All right. Next up, heading to the quantification chapter. So in version 1, we still had the CDM-based small-scale afforestation equations, which are outdated and thus no longer recognized by ICR. So we replaced those equations and linked them directly to the IPCC equations, and also specified the when the gain-loss approach is used and when a stock change approach is used. So the default crediting mechanism is a gain-loss base. So that's something we can do annually. We get the harvesting reports on the annual basis by the forest owners and can just compare those to the baseline harvest rate that we calculated in the beginning. And then to put this in kind of a safeguard from the inventory data that we get every 10 or every 15 years, we do a reconciliation every time we get new inventory data. And what we then do is we use the measured increment that we get from this inventory data and recalculate both scenarios in hindsight. So we recalculate the baseline scenario with the then measured increment value, and we recalculate the project scenario. And that gives us two model stocks for the points where we do this calculation in time. And we compare this new calculated delta with the amount of credits that have already been issued. And if the new recalculated delta is larger, we then may issue additional credits. Why do we do it this way? We calculate with very conservative assumptions in the initial calculation to just avoid overcrediting. So we use yield table increment values, and we just want to avoid punishing the projects unnecessarily. So once we have proper project data on the true increment values, we recalculate the project and then may issue additional credits. However, this is capped to the stock that has been measured in the second inventory, just to ensure that we still stay in this in the corridor of what's of the stock level that has been measured on the area. Yeah, this one's going to be pretty easy and pretty straightforward to explain. We just pretty much precise that section of the description. Nothing special. We just directly use the removal versus reduction split logic that has been implemented or introduced by Vera. So the starting stock basically sets the deciding point, and any increased stock that is above the target stock compared to the baseline counts as removals, and anything that is retained below the initial stock that counts as a reduction. So nothing reinvented. We just specified that in the methodology description. And yeah, I mean, I think I pretty much already explained it through the reconciliation process. But this is the way we do the monitoring and the ex post verification. So we have the annual monitoring reporting where we just work with the harvesting volumes that we receive from the forest operation, and then compare this to the baseline harvest rate that we calculated in the beginning, and through that get the annual data. So this is also a change in opposition to the version 1. The delta that we have annually is no longer static, but it is dynamic and just really depends on the way the forest operation harvests. And so this happens on the annual basis. And then at every new inventory, we have this reconciliation that I just explained. So then we have the new forest inventory data, do this retrospective recalibration or recalculation of both scenarios. But what we also do is we use this new inventory data to recalculate the baseline harvest rate. So then we have new stock data, we have new increment values for all the different tree species. So we can then, for the next inventory periods, recalculate once again the baseline harvest rate. And this also then applies throughout the permanence term that we have. We have at minimum a 10-year permanence term after the crediting period has concluded. So a normal case would be 30-year crediting period and then another 10-year permanence term. And through this period, we also do the regular reporting of harvest volumes to ensure that the additional stock that has been built up throughout the crediting period and has been issued in the form of credits is retained and still holds onto its the value that the buyers bought. Yeah, I don't think I'll go through every of the single of these points. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory. For example, that ownership status has to be proven throughout the entire project period. But these are the key aspects. Handing over to Ronja.
Thank you, Till. I'm up now to lead you through the remaining changes, starting with additionality. The main change we made here is that we fully aligned now with the new ICR additionality specifications version 1.0. There is a 5-level assessment in 5 levels of additionality, which combines standardized elements with project level assessment. The first 4 of them are mandatory. The 5th we made optional, and we go in not a lot of detail, but in with a little bit of detail through the first 4. So the greenhouse gas emission additionality is basically just testing if the project genuinely cuts emissions. And that is, of course, easily demonstrated through quantification results by comparing the baseline and the project and making sure that there's actually a positive delta. The statutory additionality tests if the project goes beyond what law already requires, and there are 2 levels here that are assessed. One is a regulatory context analysis. So basically, if regulations, subsidies, policy instruments, and so on make the project mandatory already by law, or if it goes beyond that, and that is periodically tested at each monitoring cycle again to make sure those conditions still uphold. This is a project-specific test. And then there is a general methodology level argumentation that there's no lock-in risk coming from the project, which is justified that the nature of IFM practices is reversible and incremental by nature. So basically, there's no lock-in risk for this kind of methodology or for this kind of project already defined at methodology level. Then we have a common practice or barrier analysis. Here we change that to a basically 2-barrier test, so a 2-layer barrier analysis. This is also structural at the methodology level. We identified 2 barriers that are inherent to this type of project according to this methodology. One is a financial barrier and refers to the opportunity cost of reduced timber harvest, so that actually the project has a loss of harvesting less than they could. And the second is an institutional barrier, which means that there's an additional burden on the forest operation with administrative and organizational additional effort that they have to make this project happen. And so this is also a burden that is created through the project. So at the methodology level, we set 2 structural barriers that are inherent to all project activities, but then this needs a project level proof that actually these barriers are in place. So yeah, this describes the common practice and barrier analysis. The 4th one is the financial additionality. This is pretty standardized and fully aligned with the ICR additionality requirements document, where it can be a proof in either project-specific investment analysis, which would be level 4A, or a simple cost analysis, level 4B, following the procedures as outlined by the requirements document. Policy additionality checks essentially of if the project falls outside national climate policy. or if that's already covered by it. So what that means is it just checks if there's a nationally determined contributions in place. And since this is basically a binary decision at each country, for each country, this is also set and in the country module itself. Maybe to add on what Till explained for the country modules, with this methodology update, we introduced 2 country modules. One is for Austria and one is for Switzerland. The idea is, or in general, the methodology is only applicable in countries where we have an approved country module. If other countries should be added in the future, a country module for these countries has to be set up and then go through a minor revision process of the methodology to be added later on. And then this is how we can extend the scope of how to and where to apply this methodology. Next, I'll guide you through the leakage assessment. We have actually made a lot of changes in the leakage assessment. We formerly had a binary 0 or 10% leakage rule, and we've changed that to a more graduated tier assessment based on actual evidence. This was mainly to meet the stronger market requirements that we see coming up, for example, from CCP, but also from what we see in CRCF coming up. And we are trying to pre-align with these requirements as they're shaping. Essentially, we're dividing into activity shifting and market leakage, and the final leakage factor is the sum of both, and they're assessed individually. So for activity shifting leakage, this refers to potential displacement of harvesting to lands that are outside the project area, but still within the proponent's control. The first test here is, is the project area covering the entire forest operation? If that is the case, then leakage is 0 because there is no room for displacement to happen. If project areas are excluded, then they have to be assessed and categorized into different tiers. Tier 1 are, for example, areas that are structurally non-leaking, where we can exclude leakage by definition of these areas. There could also be conditionally non-leaking areas, like very little productive, no commercial management relevance, or other areas. And then there's tier 3, basically refers to all areas that cannot be easily categorized in 103. If areas are excluded from the project area that are in the project proponent's control, then the areas are categorized in these tiers. And depending on where they are categorized, a staged leakage deduction of 2% or 10% could be added. On the market leakage side, this refers to an increase in harvesting on third-party lands in response to reduced timber supply from the project. So displacement effects outside the project area. And this is a multi-stage assessment that essentially tests if the actual difference in harvested timber volume from the project versus the baseline is anyhow significant in the larger sense of market to have an actual market displacement effect. So we're comparing this to the total harvesting occurring on the national level to see if this would have a high enough influence to even move the needle on the market side. I'm not going to go into more detail than that. It's kind of detailed outlined in the project document, but it can go from 10% leakage to 20 or 40, depending on the severity of those potential displacement effects. Next, we introduced bundling or grouping of projects. That's rather on a formality side. What we're trying to solve with this is that we have a very fragmented forest structure in European forests in general, but especially also for the 2 countries where we now introduced the country module, Austria and Switzerland. Germany would apply the same. So very many small projects or landowners face a hurdle at the moment that the project development, certification, and MRV costs are too high to make it valuable for them to participate. And we want to lower that burden by making grouped and aggregation of areas possible. There's two ways: a bundled project or group projects. They all come with certain requirements that need to be met, both of those ways. The main difference between the two is that in bundled projects, they all must have the same start dates. For group projects, they can also be added later on. But in general, this is now implemented at methodology level that we have the opportunity to aggregate areas. Next, summing up the core changes with this methodology update, also summing up the points that Till already introduced earlier. We have the maybe largest methodological change is the climate adapted baseline, or in general the baseline, of course, which now is also climate adapted, because even in the baseline scenario, rotation length shift with climate risk. And this is something we've implemented as an additional safeguard to improve the quality of our credits, which is also something that we don't largely see happening in the IFM space at the moment, but we think is super important to raise the quality of the credits we bring into the market. Then same goes for the next point, credits coming only from stable trees. So having a structural cap that means that vulnerable stands can never generate credits, which also, of course, is linking into a reduced permanence risk. Then we have the baseline is now dynamically calibrated. We calibrate at every inventory against project, historical, and regional data. It's rooted in reality, so the accounting is periodically checked against the actual measured stock. And we have the country modules on a more like methodological structural side, country modules which ensure a real local fit with national geographic, but also legislative, management, behavior aspects, using local data sources from local scientific institutes, and without losing the rigor or scalability of the methodology in general, but having a really good national fit. Then the evidence-based leakage assessment that I just explained, which is now tiered and anchored, and the deductions are evidence anchored instead of default rates. Then we have the removal and reduction split that was reworked, and we have the 5-level test for additionality now, which is also reconfirmed at every monitoring period and does not stay static from project start. This is all from our side. I think we're quite on time, and we are handing back over to Gumi. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you, guys, for really comprehensive and detailed presentation about the update, both on the methodology and the update. So now we're into the Q&A session. So there are at least 4 questions that have been published or submitted. So for all of you who are burning with questions, please do not hesitate. Or if you just after the session, of course, we want your feedback, both just compliments and like structured or any detailed feedback from you during the session. I want to start with a small joke from Iceland. I don't know if it translates into the session, but we have a saying here in Iceland: what to do if you get lost in the woods of Iceland? You stand up. I don't know if it translates, but so to the questions. At least the Icelandic guys, they got it. So to the questions. How do the country modules work, and what informations are defined in them, or the country modules, and how to develop, or how are additional country modules added?
Yeah, thanks, Gumi. So right now there is mainly 3 parameters that are in the country modules. And that is the databases for the treatment group classification. I can also give you like a very brief example. Let me jump into the methodology description. Yeah, so we have the yeah, I know. It's the Austria country module, and for example, here we have the first part, the treatment group classification, where it just defines which data source we're using. So in this case, we are using the Austrian so-called Baumarten Ampel, which is called, I guess, the tree species traffic lights. Very beautiful name, and this allows us to select areas in Austria where the project area is and get an assessment here of the suitability of tree species. And this is then the basis for us to do the standardized process for the allocation. And next to this, there's also some aspects for the baseline calibration. For example, minimum rotation periods that are legally binding in the different countries, as well as the parameters that are important for the leakage, the market leakage assessment, as for example, national harvesting wood levels. So right now it's only 3 parameters that are in the country modules, and might be more. And as Ronja pointed out, this new country modules or changes to the existing ones will happen through the minor revision process of ICR.
Thank you for that. To the next one. Very commendable work of ICR and Pina, both from a climate and a forest owner perspective. Great work. Nice. One detail. To what extent do the calibration factors enable or prevent cherry picking?
They do not enable cherry picking at all. Because so the way the calibration factors work in theory is for the historical calibration factor, we basically do the same thing that we do for the project scenario. So we calculate the Gerhardt yield rate, but for the previous inventory cycle. So we take the second to last inventory, we calculate the Gerhardt yield rate on that basis, and then we compare it to what has actually been harvested in this period, because we know it, because it's the past, like we have the data, and then we can evaluate how accurate this model value depicts the reality of this particular forest operation. And if we see the reality harvest rate the real harvest rate has been lower than the model harvest rate through Gerhardt, we reduce the baseline harvest rate also for the project, because we see, okay, the site conditions of this forest operation appear to incentivize a slightly lower harvest rate. Then we also assume this trend continues into the project. And the same logic applies to the regional calibration factor, where we just don't use the historic inventory data, but we use data from the national forest inventory and try to build a similar comparison. This is not always possible because we don't always have the data available that we need for this. So there we might have to go for a slightly simpler approach, but there is still no way of cherry picking this.
Maybe, can I add? Sure. So the idea of how we set up this baseline. First of all, we wanted to have a standardized procedure because it needs to prevent cherry picking, as we said. So a standardized approach that you have to follow, where you have zero wiggle room in tweaking towards what would be essentially good for the project delta. Then the sustainable best practice harvest in itself is a model value, or it's a model formula, which uses project-specific data. So it's already rooted in specific project data and project reality, but using a standardized approach by the Gerhardt formula. That's the sustainable best practice rate as the general basis of how the baseline is calculated. Then these calibration factors, what we try to do with that is to close the loophole, basically, that the model value might not be really fit for project reality, because every project reality is different. So we think there's 2 main influencing factors to what the project would actually do. The one is the personal management preference. which we try to deduct from that historical calibration factor or through that. Because like Till just explained, it might be inherently rooted in either the management practice of this forest operation that they go below sustainable forest rates or way above. And if that happens, then we should account for it for whatever reason. There might be different ones. And then the second calibration is the regional calibration factor, which we try to account for policy and very regional regulatory effects. For example, in Switzerland, it could be subsidies for building special harvesting systems with Seilbahn. What's Seilbahn in English?
Rope.
Like rope harvesting on very steep slopes. And if that, for example, would be something that is a new influencer on the management practice, then we should account for that because it will increase harvesting naturally beyond what the model value says. So basically, this is how we build the baseline. As we have the standardized approach through the model value, but we calibrate it with project reality in management preferences. And project and regional reality in, for example, policy or regulatory effects that could not be otherwise shown in the general model value.
Thank you for this comprehensive response or answer. There are two participants with raised hands. I don't know if it works to unmute yourself, but you can try, Thomas.
Yes, I try. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, my name is Thomas Lundmark. I'm a retired professor of silviculture from Sweden. And it has been really interesting to read through this document. I have been, at least during the last 4 years, also been developing a methodology for improved forest management, but for Nordic conditions. And I think it's... Well, reading this methodology, I just confirmed that if you're grounded in practical forestry, you tend to think in a very similar way. So I'm really happy to see that there is another methodology that is working by the same principles, that you're working with. Using the best available local data. It's a forward-looking approach. You have a standardized approach how to establish the baseline to avoid cheating, as Ronja said. And it resembles the business logics of active forestry. So I haven't spent enough hours reading all the details in this methodology yet, but I find it so far it's really strong, and it's going to be workable for practical forestry. But there was one thing that immediately caught my attention, and then I can ask perhaps a question about this, and it's about the. Normally, we are struggling with the baseline because that's the most important component of everything. But when you come closer to the market, there is another question. It's not only about additionality. It's about the market leakage issue. And I think that again you have this. Stage 2 test that is very similar to what we have been thinking about. I mean, it's leakage is not really, market leakage is not a simple thing to cope with. So you have to have something that is robust. And so the only way forward that we have come to think about is it's a very similar to your stage 2 test. So again, I think it's a confirmation of if you're thinking a lot about the same thing, some question, and you know what you're thinking about, you come to very similar conclusions. But what is really struggling me at the moment is what do the ICR think about this, and perhaps especially there are all these rating institutes like Silvera and B0 and others that they put a lot of they think it's really important to consider market leakage. But will this approach that you are suggesting, do you think it will be accepted by the market actors?
Thank you. Thank you.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Thomas, for this comprehensive question, and good to hear that you are thinking the similar way, which brings grounds to the approach that PINA has on this methodological approach. So maybe if you want to comment from PINA, just I'll start, and then you can comment if you want to. So just on the acceptance of this methodological approach. So of course, this methodology we have been reviewing this preliminary, giving feedback on all of the approaches. So we have been, of course, not approving anything, but giving some feedback on the approach. The methodology will, of course, then be validated by a competent VVP that is accredited for doing the validation. Then recently we did a launch with MSCI, who does project ratings in carbon markets. So we will see how MSCI will consider this methodology and the project that will be applying that methodology later. So we will see that in due time. So we'll have that scrutiny from the VVP. We will have the feedback from the stakeholders through this public consultation. We will have our internal review. Then we'll get the third-party independent of ICR requirements and the methodological approach based from MSCI, and then it will also be subject to risk assessment that is conducted by also an independent party, which is KITA. So if you want to add something, Till, or you guys.
Yes, I'm happy to answer that. So we have struggled a lot with the right approach to the leakage assessment because of the nature of the IFM project. We are not talking a huge difference between baseline and project harvesting in the sense of total market leakage effects. So we're sometimes in a very small corridor of difference, and it depends on the size of the forest operation. But given the fragmented forest structure in Europe, we don't face the same project sizes as you'd have in Canada or the United States, for example. So a deferred harvest from a 2,000 hectare project in the context of a national wood market will be very minute by definition. And that means that the leakage assessment should especially be tiered around the significance of that harvest difference and whether it should account, and at the same time, you can't punish a project proponent in a huge size of leakage deduction if this harvesting difference is really insignificant in a total market context. So the tiered assessment that we've set up here is kind of a compromise between what we see the market requiring for safeguard in terms of leakage, but rooted in a project reality where we know that the general harvesting difference will, in most cases, in reality, not make a huge difference for the national wood market dynamics. So this is how we set this up. And my honest opinion about the de minimis tests and the stage tests, or on a different note, why did we put in these stages at all, and what are we trying to assess by that? So I've looked left and right in the market, what's going on, what are requirements from what's emerging under CRCF, what is already CCP approved IFM methodologies, and how did they react to it. There's a published document from CCP which comments on on the approval process of IFM methodologies, and gives kind of it's not an approval process. It's not a guideline document in that sense, but in itself. But they say what they will accept or not accept and for what reasons. And it kind of gives you an idea of what CCP will accept in the future, and where they're still also trying to understand themselves what would be the IFM specific requirements and how to tweak that to IFM realities. And in that document, it clearly says that a zero leakage reduction will not be accepted ever. And so this is one thing which we needed to account to say, okay, if there's a significant harvest influence, then it must be accounted for, even if only in a minimal way. Then it refers to other methodologies where it says we accept these parts, we don't accept these parts. And we've tried to use that in our methodological approach to kind of anticipate what what direction CCP would be going into, because we see this as market shaping and hugely important to be aligned with that in the future. But it's not a final CCP requirement. It's just the board observations on approval processes of IFM methodologies that I've tried to use here in shaping the leakage assessment and making it conform with that. It's not a real answer to your question, but it describes the process and what we considered. And I'm very happy to jump into a discussion maybe outside of this webinar context to discuss further how we could improve it and align on the leakage topic.
Thank you very much. You gotta like, Dr. Mohammed Abed, please, if you can unmute yourself and show your face. Thank you.
I am Mohammed Abed. Thank you for your invitation. I'm sorry to join you a little bit late. I am a land degradation expert on the Arab Center for the Studies of Arid Zone and Dry Land, ACSAT, in Damascus, Syria. My question is, in this new version, I'm asking about remote sensing measurement. Are remote sensing measurement accepted, and to what level? Or we still need to do field measurement for carbon biomass and soil organic carbon? Thank you.
Thank you. Did you get that, Pinar?
I think we got the first part regarding remote sensing, but I didn't catch the second part of the question. We can also answer the first one first, and you can or
could you repeat the
second part?
I just was asking about remote sensing measurement. Are remote sensing measurement in new version are accepted, or we still need to do this field measurement for carbon biomass and soil organic carbon?
Du kannst vielleicht zu Soil Organic Carbon gleich den Ausschluss noch sagen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'll answer that quickly. It mainly depends on the quality of the data, and of course it massively depends on the aspects and the attributes of the forest. So if you look at the forests in Austria, they're usually multi-layered, they're close to nature, they have at least 2 age classes at the same spot. So for these types of forests, it's completely different to use remote sensing, especially if we talk about airborne remote sensing, compared to, for example, more regular forest types like in Northern Europe, in the mountains, where the terrain also helps you. So our goal is to use only high quality data. And if the data fulfills the requirements, then we are happy to use whatever source of data you provide. But it's important to get a real and precise look into the forest measurements and so on and so on. And in Austria, we have the experience that using remote sensor by drone or airborne alone is usually not enough. The current trend is towards randomized sampling using backpack laser scanning. So laser scan supported randomized sampling. And that usually also gets takes in some drone data as well, but that's complementary. That's not solely drone based. Depends on the country and the forest.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're a little bit over time. I think we have time for maybe one more question before we wrap it up. We have one question here from Shiv. If new forest subsidies arise or timber prices spike during a project cycle, could a European host country project fail periodic reconfirmation and have credit issuance permanently halted?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't catch it.
Yeah. So if new forestry subsidies arise or timber prices spike during the project cycle, could a European host country project fail periodic reconfirmation and have credit issuances permanently halted? So a little bit broad question here.
So I'm explaining it a little bit more so that like you can understand. So myself, Shiv, I am a project developer working across, Africa, Latin America, Asia. So right now doing some red projects in Amazon. So the question is like this framework, like it states that the barrier continuity, financial deviation, and policy context must be reconfirmed, right? Every single monitoring period rather than being one single time. So like there something like, if there is a policy which is coming up, some subsidies, some timber prices highly, getting by the government or, this kind of thing. So in mid-term of the project cycle, so could an activity project like it fails its reconfirmation and have its credit issuance permanently halted? And this is a critical question because, this can force, a project developer to reapprove the additionality every few years, and which will also introduce, massive, commercial uncertainty. So that is why I asked this question.
So I will start by answering from the ICR perspective, how we designed the additionality and additionality specification. So we introduced in last year reporting obligations on additionality. So the intention was not to undermine the additionality test that is done ex ante. It's more the intention of better understanding the context of the project as it evolves over time. So the buyers and other stakeholders understand the additionality aspect of the project going forward. So it's not that with the additionality reporting, we are deeming the project will not be able to continue. It's more just reporting on the current state of the project context. If you want to add something more context, Till, Ronnie, or Vincent.
Yes. So exactly. So the periodic proving that the assumptions made to prove financial or legal additionality still hold. That is the purpose of looking at that at every monitoring period. And yes, the consequence could certainly be that, for example, if the German government or the Austrian government would now write a specific law that implies that forest owners must reduce harvest rates and increase stock in stable tree species, and basically is something very much aligned with the project activity as defined by our methodology, then that could lead to a point where we say the project is no longer additionally, and then it would be paused until this condition no longer holds or stopped, essentially. The likelihood of that happening on the legal side is very low, but still it makes sense to review this periodically to make sure that we are still additional. And the same goes, of course, for subsidies or other effects or taxation or other things that could affect the financial additionality side of the project. So this needs to be periodically revised and proved again. Yeah, and the consequence could be that we stop.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we are 6 minutes past the scheduled time, so I think we need to just conclude the session. It has been quite fun, and thank you for the participation in the webinar. I hope you, if you have some questions or any comments, then we encourage you to participate in this consultation. It is open until the end of July. So, and that I just want to thank Pina for a comprehensive presentation, and those of you that submitted questions or you that participated directly, thank you for your participation. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everyone, bye bye.
Thanks.
Everyone, bye bye.
Bye.